Hey guys, good morning, Junior Youth Online. We're so glad to have you here. I wanted to mention that we invite you to join us on Monday. That's tomorrow and every Monday when we get together online. I know you guys are going back to school and you're really excited about being back in class for the most part, socializing with your friends. But we do hang out for an hour on Monday evening from 6 to 7, and I promise to kick you out after an hour. If you join us, we play some games and some fun activities. We've even had some prizes in the past. I'm not bribing you or anything, but just saying we'd love to have you there. And obviously, we do something spiritual as well. We look at different verses and we talk about different things that apply to your life from a spiritual health point of view. Yesterday, I had a birthday, and a physical birthday, a day that is remembered for the day I was physically born into the world. My mom remembers that day quite well. I was 10 pounds, 1 ounce. And I think there were about 36 hours of labor involved. Anyway, I was born with a head full of blonde hair and a shock of platinum blonde in the center, and that's a memorable day. People around me remember that. I don't remember it, but people in my family, my mom and my dad, and obviously my grandparents and relatives remember that day that I was born. But throughout the day yesterday, I was thinking about another day that is equally as important to me, and that's my second birthday. When I was young, and I'm going to show you a few pictures in a second, but when I was young, I was raised in the Caribbean, and my parents were missionaries, and growing up down there in a very different society, a different way of life, I was well aware that my parents in the first place were in the Caribbean, Antigua at that time, to share the love of Jesus, to share the story of Jesus, to share the story of how a person can know again a relationship with God after it being broken by sin, and that's called redemption. And it's a big part of the gospel story. It is the gospel story, actually. And so I was very well aware from a young age that I needed Jesus. Not really sure I knew why I needed Jesus. The way I was raised, the the church that I went to, there was a big emphasis on what happens if you didn't accept Jesus. So I knew all about hell, and I knew all about the being. I was told that I was going to be left. My parents were believers, and I was told that I would be left behind. I was taught that. So those were all things that were coursing in the back of my mind. And as a young kid, I was whatever, not really thinking about those things. And I would mention them periodically to my parents. There was a story that my mom remembers when I was about 3 years old, 3.5, maybe 4. My parents were traveling around the island of Antigua in their Volkswagen Beetle, and they had a glove compartment full of tracts. And tracts are just little papers that share the news of the gospel, usually with a story and an illustration, a few verses. Anyway, I had no idea. I couldn't read, but I said to my mom, "What are you doing?" And so she told me exactly what I just told you, and I said, "Well, don't you want me to go to heaven? Why don't you give me one?" And so, but like I said, I couldn't read. But gradually I grew to, in my understanding that I needed Jesus. Um, and it became a little more evident to me as I got a little older why. My parents believed that when we did wrong, we suffered consequences right away. Consequences in those days looked like a smack on the butt. Um, sometimes harder than others. In those days, there were no timeouts and no loss of something. The consequence was usually a different type of punishment, and so I was very well aware that I was a little sinner, that I did things that weren't to their standards. I did things against them. And I was learning important lessons, I guess, that you and I as humans have really come out of relationship with God because of the fact that we do bad things. It's just in our DNA. We do bad things. We do things not only against our parents, but we do things against God. Sometimes unknowingly, sometimes knowingly, sometimes very, very willfully. But in any event, we do things against God. But He loves us so much, and He's always waiting for us to come back. Always waiting for us to say sorry. That was the big thing I learned early on as well. That saying sorry was something my parents was the lesson my parents were trying to drive home. Was not just that I shouldn't be doing whatever I did to against their guidelines, but that I should also say sorry. And so I learned those very important lessons from a very young age. When I was 8 years old, we moved to a brand new island, an island we hadn't lived on before, and that was the island of St. Lucia. St. Lucia is a beautiful place, as you can see. This was the view outside my house where I lived when I was 10 years old. 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. So somewhere around, just a little younger than you guys, this is what the view outside my home. At the age of 8, though, we lived further on up the island, and at the north of the island is where we started when we moved there. And my dad, being a preacher, they would preach in that kind of church. They would preach every single night of the week, except for Saturday. So Sunday through Friday, they would preach, and they were called gospel meetings back then. And the two men that preached shared the story of the good news of the gospel every single night for half an hour each. And I was 8 years old at the time, and listened to the story every single night for 13 weeks with my dad and another man named Ed Miller. And listened to the story for 13 weeks long, every single night. That's 78 weeks, or 78 nights of services telling the story. I knew this story so well. I guess in essence, I was a little stubborn as well, and thought just by maybe knowing the story that it was good enough. That somehow I was in a relationship with God by knowing about Him, but I didn't know Him. I didn't know His Son at that point. I recall when I was 8 years old in the month of July, the last night of the series ended, and we got in our Jeep, and we went home. When I arrived home that night, my parents had visitors over. Maybe it was Mr. Miller, or maybe it was someone else. I quite forget who it was, and I wanted to be part of what they were, their visit, but I wasn't able to because I was younger. So I was in my room and I got into some mischief in there. Actually, I set my waste paper basket on fire. Thankfully, it was made of metal, and it itself didn't burn. But I was telling you before that I had grown up hearing the stories of hell and how it was a place to avoid at all costs. And the fire burning that night in the waste paper basket made me think of that. And I realized that I needed Jesus. I was 8 years old, so I didn't really comprehend all the stuff that was involved, but I realized I needed Jesus. So that evening I asked him into my life, not really knowing what that meant at all. It was just what I was doing that night was a fire escape to make sure that I was going to be saved from this terrible place called hell. Life went on, and we moved back to from St. Lucia to Sudbury. And as I grew older, I started to realize that this thing called salvation was actually relationship, and that it was something that I could walk into, something that could be developed. You know, growing up in the Caribbean, growing up anytime, you go through different stages. Like I say, I didn't know when I was born. I didn't know those stages, and then gradually I came to recognize my mom's face and recognize my dad's smile and recognize different things in my surrounding, and so I was growing. That's very similar to my salvation story, actually. So after my second birthday, after I came to know Jesus and accepted him into my life, I grew to know him to the point where I really feel that I'm still getting to know him, still getting to know what Christianity is all about, but enjoying that relationship more the older I get, the older I grow. So I know that every single story is different. Every single way of coming to Jesus, coming to Christ is different, but that's my story. And I'm so glad to be able to share it today. When I was in the Caribbean, I was always forever breaking stuff, parts of my body. So this is a picture of me. I had a broken toe, so it was just my big toe that's sticking out of the cast here. But we went to the hospital, and it was a brand new doctor, just being trained, and she looked at the x-ray and thought, wow, we've got to immobilize this foot. So she did a good job, as you can see. So I was in this almost full body cast for a little break in my big toe. This is a picture of a flat tire that we had one day. I guess my mom took this picture of us at the side of the road. At this point, my brother is standing watching, and I'm not really getting anything out of this lesson at all. I'm just chilling out, not sure what I'm holding in my hand, but anyway, that is always why we always left half an hour early for anywhere we were going, and just in case something like that happened. This is a picture of when I was about your age. My parents had bought some red snappers off some fishermen, and we were going to have them for dinner. And while they were being cleaned out, I got distracted by this eye, and so I smeared my arm with ketchup and pretended that I lost my eye. I was always a comedian, or at least thought I was. Anyway, this last picture is me on my bike. It was called a chopper, I love this bike. The gears were right in the middle, so you reach down, right down in the middle. I think I had 3 gears. This is my friend Vaccaro, and man, I love this bike. I got all over town on this bike. When we are back together, I will share stories of the bike if you'd like to know. Um, anyway, guys, it's been fantastic being with you today. Thanks for sticking around. Join us tomorrow to when we hang out together on Google Meet, and also if you have Instagram or if your parents have Instagram, follow us there, and like and subscribe to this channel so that you can always be notified. Tap the bell so that you can be notified when we have videos uploaded for you guys to watch. Until then, guys, we love you lots. Have a good week tomorrow, starting school back. We're excited for you. Glad that's finally happening, and you can see your friends face to face. Talk to you later. Bye. God bless.